The second Meghan Markle appeared on the world stage, the world thought they knew her. The glamorous Duchess of Sussex, the Hollywood actress turned royal, stepping into the limelight with grace, charm, and poise. But what if everything you thought you knew about Meghan was only the surface? What if behind those perfectly curated smiles, carefully drafted statements, and public appearances designed to charm millions, there lay a far more audacious plan? One that stretched far beyond the gates of Windsor Castle and across the Atlantic to the corridors of power in Washington, D.C. Imagine for a moment that the woman the media portrayed as a fairy tale princess, a victim of the press, and a champion of social causes, had ambitions that were far more calculated and far-reaching than anyone could have predicted. What if she wasn't simply leaving the royal family for privacy and freedom, but was quietly laying the groundwork for a political future in the United States? Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. It sounds almost unbelievable, and yet the evidence is there. Leaked files, confidential correspondences, and revelations uncovered by investigative reporters, including Tucker Carlson, suggest that Meghan Markle may have been building a network of political operatives, strategists, and influential insiders in Washington. What she presented to the world as activism, philanthropy, and a quest for independence could, according to sources, have been a carefully orchestrated strategy to gain political influence in the U.S., all while maintaining the guise of a private citizen. And she may have used her royal title, her global visibility, and her access to international networks as leverage to open doors that would have remained closed to most Americans. Consider this: the Duchess of Sussex, born into an American family, marries into one of the oldest monarchies in the world. She steps into royal life, performs her duties under intense scrutiny, and yet, behind the cameras and away from the public eye, she allegedly begins building connections with political figures in the United States. This isn't just networking, it's strategic. Emails, private messages, and meeting notes suggest that these contacts were designed not for charity or casual influence, but for laying the foundation of a political career. In other words, Meghan Markle could have been orchestrating a move from royal power to political power, using every advantage at her disposal. Now, before you jump to conclusions, think about the stakes. The royal family is a centuries-old institution, steeped in tradition and protocol. Its members are expected to uphold a strict separation from politics, especially foreign politics. For Meghan, as a titled member of the monarchy, to use her position, even indirectly, to cultivate political alliances in another country is not just audacious, it's unprecedented. And that's exactly why Tucker Carlson, the outspoken commentator known for his incisive interviews and investigative reporting, was left speechless when he uncovered these connections. Leaked files revealed an intricate web of communications, meetings, and strategic plans that suggest the Duchess was quietly preparing for a future that most of the public would never suspect. But let's take a step back. The story that the world has been told about Meghan Markle is one of rebellion, independence, and personal freedom. The Sussexes' exit from royal duties was framed as a quest for privacy, a refusal to be controlled by palace protocols, and a desire to forge their own path in California. Interviews with Oprah Winfrey, Netflix documentaries, and media appearances painted a picture of a couple seeking liberation from the constraints of monarchy. They were portrayed as victims of a rigid institution, as champions of mental health, and as advocates for causes that mattered to them. And in the court of public opinion, the narrative largely worked. Sympathy poured in, followers multiplied, and the Sussexes' brand flourished. But beneath that surface, the leaked files suggest another story. A story where strategy, foresight, and ambition intersect with royal privilege and public perception. Imagine Meghan drafting communications with American political strategists, seeking advice, and testing the waters for potential campaigns. Imagine her leveraging celebrity connections, high-profile endorsements, and global visibility to gauge influence in a political context. Imagine the planning, the meetings, the correspondence, all hidden from public view, carefully orchestrated to remain invisible to journalists and royal watchers alike. This wasn't simply casual networking. Sources suggest this was a calculated effort to build influence, establish credibility, and perhaps even position herself for a political office in the United States. You might ask, How could a duchess, a royal figure, justify reaching out to political operatives in another country? And here is where the contradiction becomes most striking. Meghan consistently presented herself as a private citizen after stepping back from royal duties. She claimed independence, privacy, and neutrality. She championed causes under the guise of humanitarian efforts, philanthropy, and advocacy. Yet, according to the evidence, she may have been using her royal title as leverage, her public visibility as a platform, and her access to global networks as a tool to build strategic political connections. The audacity is remarkable, the contrast striking, and the implications profound. And the timing is critical. Leaked files indicate that this activity occurred not long after Meghan and Harry stepped away from the monarchy, while the world's attention was on their California move, media interviews, and burgeoning media empire. Most of the public was focused on the narrative of escape, freedom, and rebirth. Meanwhile, strategic communications, political correspondence, and relationship building may have been quietly unfolding. The public saw leisure and lifestyle. The insiders may have seen ambition and foresight. Now, this raises a series of questions that demand attention. Did Meghan Markle intend to run for political office? Were these communications exploratory or part of a concrete plan? How much did her royal title facilitate these connections, and how much risk was she taking in pursuing them? Could a member of the royal family, even a retired one, ethically navigate the intersection of monarchy and foreign politics? And what does this mean for the Sussex brand, the royal family, and public perception at large? These questions hang in the air, unanswered, tantalizing, and fraught with tension. To understand the full scope, we need to follow the trail. From the first leaks that stunned Tucker Carlson, to the communications between Meghan and political strategists, to the responses of Washington insiders, the story unfolds like a political thriller. Every email, every meeting, every handshake becomes a clue, a piece of a puzzle that, when assembled, reveals ambitions far more expansive than most could have imagined. And the drama doesn't end there. For as much as Meghan has sought to craft her own narrative, the leaks suggest that the narrative was not entirely under her control. Others in the political and royal circles may have recognized the signals she was sending and the implications they carried. And then there is the irony. A woman who claimed independence and neutrality may have been actively cultivating power and influence in the very heart of global politics. The same title that granted her global recognition, the title that the royal family bestowed upon her, may have become the key to opening doors in a political landscape she had never publicly entered. This duality, royal figure and aspiring political influencer, creates a tension that is difficult to reconcile. And it is exactly what makes this story so compelling, so controversial, and so irresistible to audiences. Consider for a moment the perspective of the public. Millions of people watched, empathized, and followed Meghan's journey with fascination and devotion. The narrative presented to them was of personal liberation, of stepping away from the constraints of monarchy to pursue meaningful causes. But behind that public story, there may have been another narrative entirely, a narrative of ambition, strategy, and political calculation. The tension between these two narratives, the public and the private, the royal and the political, creates a drama that is both riveting and shocking. It is a story that, once fully revealed, challenges perceptions, questions intentions, and forces audiences to reconsider everything they thought they knew about Meghan Markle. And this is where Tucker Carlson comes in. Known for his investigative approach, his eye for inconsistencies, and his ability to uncover hidden truths, Carlson found himself facing material that was impossible to ignore. Documents, correspondences, and insider accounts suggested a web of political strategy that was sophisticated, deliberate, and potentially unprecedented for a member of the royal family. His reaction, as he described on air, was one of disbelief, incredulity, and, ultimately, speechlessness. The story he uncovered was not merely a tabloid curiosity. It was a revelation that could reshape public understanding of royal and political intersections in the modern era. So, what does this all mean for you, the viewer? Why should this matter? Because it is not merely a story about one individual's ambition. It is a story about perception versus reality, influence versus intention, and the delicate balance between public narrative and private strategy. It is about how power can be quietly built behind the scenes, leveraging visibility, status, and networks in ways that are both audacious and surprising. And it is about the lengths to which someone may go to position themselves at the center of influence, whether in Windsor or Washington. But here is the catch. The full story has never been revealed in a single narrative. Until now. In the chapters ahead, we will explore the leaked files, the secret correspondences, the meetings with political operatives, and the subtle strategies that suggest Meghan's ambitions may have extended far beyond the public eye. Each revelation will raise new questions, challenge assumptions, and force a reconsideration of everything we thought we knew. And at the end of this journey, one question will remain. Was Meghan Markle simply seeking independence, or was she quietly plotting her next move in the corridors of U.S. power? But what came next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. What happens when a prince and a duchess walk away from centuries of tradition, privilege, and expectation? For the world, it was shocking. For the royal family, it was unprecedented. And for Meghan Markle, it may have been the first calculated move in a plan no one could have foreseen. The headlines were everywhere. Harry and Meghan stepped back from royal duties. Social media exploded. News outlets framed it as the couple seeking independence, escaping relentless scrutiny, and reclaiming a life unshackled by monarchy. The public cheered. Critics condemned. And through it all, Meghan's image as the modern, empowered duchess was cemented. But beneath the surface, there was more. Much more. Imagine leaving a life that millions idolize, a life where every action, gesture, and word is magnified. The Sussexes' exit wasn't just a personal decision, it was a seismic shift. It sent ripples through Buckingham Palace, shocked aides, and forced the monarchy to confront questions that had never been asked before. How could royals, raised in centuries of protocol, simply step back? How could they navigate the media storm while preserving public respect, personal ambition, and privacy? For Meghan, the exit was framed as liberation. She and Harry would create a new life in North America, free from the constraints of Windsor Castle. But what if that freedom wasn't just about privacy or mental health? What if stepping away from the monarchy was also a strategic move, a way to reposition herself in a new arena where her influence could be reshaped and expanded? The public saw a duchess moving to California. They saw interviews with Oprah and Netflix documentaries, casual strolls through the streets of Los Angeles, and glimpses of a life seemingly ordinary, yet impossibly glamorous. They saw a woman speaking about mental health, equality, and empowerment. But the leaked files suggest a hidden narrative, one where she was quietly establishing connections with political operatives, exploring pathways to influence, and laying the groundwork for what could be interpreted as a political future. Even the timing raises eyebrows. Their exit coincided with a period when Meghan's popularity was skyrocketing, when media attention on royal drama reached fever pitch, and when global audiences were glued to every announcement, every interview. Could this timing have been coincidental? Or was it a carefully calculated moment to maximize visibility while pursuing strategic interests behind the scenes? Here's the contradiction that makes the story so compelling. Meghan publicly claimed independence. She presented herself as a private citizen. She eschewed royal titles in everyday life. And yet, according to leaked communications, she may have simultaneously been cultivating relationships with individuals capable of opening doors into the U.S. political system. The very act of leaving the monarchy, framed as liberation, may have also provided her with cover to expand influence in a different, more powerful sphere. Imagine the private meetings. Imagine strategy calls, confidential emails, and conversations that, to the outside observer, seemed routine but were anything but. She may have been learning the mechanics of political campaigning, understanding the influence of lobbyists, and even gauging support for a future that wasn't visible to the public eye. The files reveal names, dates, and correspondence that hint at deliberate engagement with Washington insiders, think tanks, and political consultants. The exit also exposed cracks within the royal family itself. Long-standing protocols, carefully maintained for centuries, were suddenly being challenged. Advisors were reportedly scrambling. Courtiers whispered behind closed doors. Even the Queen, a figure who had navigated decades of monarchy with poise, was forced to reckon with a situation that seemed unmanageable. The implications were profound. The exit wasn't just a personal choice. It was a disruption to an institution, a recalibration of centuries of expectation. Public reaction was equally fascinating. Millions felt empathy for Meghan, viewing her as a modern heroine who challenged outdated traditions and sought a life of authenticity. At the same time, critics labeled the move as selfish, opportunistic, and even reckless. Yet the duality of her narrative, empowered individual versus strategic influencer, only fueled curiosity. How could one woman occupy both spaces at once? How could the public see one version, while the reality suggested another? And then there's the question of leverage. By stepping back, Meghan removed herself from direct royal oversight while retaining all the benefits of visibility and influence. She became a global figure, unbound by palace rules, yet still associated with the prestige of the royal family. That combination, a public platform, global attention, and strategic freedom, provided the perfect environment for ambition to flourish. Could this have been intentional? Were the Sussexes merely seeking a quieter life, or was this the first step in a broader, calculated strategy? Consider the optics. The world was watching. Every statement, every move, every social media post was scrutinized. And yet, hidden beneath those curated moments were indications that Meghan was reaching out, establishing networks, and exploring influence in ways that were invisible to the public. Emails, reports, and insider accounts suggest she may have been cultivating relationships not for entertainment or charity, but with an eye toward political engagement. Each step appeared natural, casual, even innocent, but in context, the pattern is striking. It wasn't just about connections. It was about positioning. By stepping away from formal royal duties, Meghan gained mobility, agency, and the ability to operate outside the strictures of protocol. She could attend events, meet influencers, and engage in political discourse without the same constraints faced by active royals. At the same time, she could invoke her title when advantageous, signaling prestige and credibility in negotiations and introductions. The combination of independence and title-based leverage was uniquely powerful. And yet, contradictions abound. How does one reconcile the claim of privacy with strategic political engagement? How does one balance a narrative of independence with outreach to power brokers? These are questions that continue to fuel debate. The leaked files don't just hint at ambition. They suggest a level of sophistication and foresight that challenges public perception. The Duchess, who seemed to step back to protect her mental health, may have been stepping forward in influence, strategy, and long-term positioning. The story doesn't end there. Exiting the monarchy also exposed vulnerabilities, both personal and political. By moving to the United States, Meghan entered a different cultural and political ecosystem, one where influence is currency and connections are power. Navigating this terrain required finesse, knowledge, and discretion. Reports suggest she surrounded herself with advisors capable of guiding her through these new channels, individuals who understood the nuances of U.S. political culture, lobbying, and media management. It was, in many ways, an education in influence, and it may have been happening quietly, away from public scrutiny. What about Harry? His presence, influence, and global profile certainly helped. But the focus here is on Meghan. The leaked files emphasize her agency, her initiative, and her role in orchestrating conversations with political figures. This is not mere accompaniment. It is active participation in strategy, network building, and positioning for influence. The narrative that emerges is one of dual identities: public duchess and private strategist, global figure and political aspirant, media darling and behind-the-scenes operator. And that brings us to the final question of this chapter. Was stepping back from royal duties truly an act of liberation? Or was it the first calculated step in a trajectory that extended from Windsor Castle to Washington, D.C.? The lines between personal freedom and strategic ambition blur. What appeared to be a personal choice may have been part of a far larger plan, one designed to position Meghan in a sphere of influence few could have imagined. But the real shock comes next. For as we will see, the leaked files don't stop at establishing connections. They reveal detailed plans, strategic correspondence, and meetings that suggest a political ambition carefully mapped out long before the public could even glimpse the first hints. And what Tucker Carlson uncovered, it was enough to leave him speechless, questioning how a single individual could navigate the intersection of royalty, celebrity, and politics with such audacity. And then, One file surfaced that would change everything. A file that hinted at the possibility of a future none of us could have predicted. What would it feel like to uncover a secret so audacious that even someone as seasoned and skeptical as Tucker Carlson is left speechless? Imagine scanning through documents, emails, and correspondence that reveal a layer of strategy so intricate, so deliberate, that the public persona of Meghan Markle suddenly begins to unravel. This is exactly what happened when Carlson received the leaked files suggesting that the Duchess of Sussex was quietly building a political network in Washington, D.C., while publicly claiming to be a private citizen. The story begins with a tip, an anonymous source with access to confidential communications. Carlson, known for his keen investigative instincts, was initially skeptical. After all, Meghan Markle's public narrative had been consistent: philanthropy, activism, mental health advocacy, and an exit from royal duties framed as a search for independence. Politics? That seemed improbable. But as he sifted through the documents, what emerged was nothing short of extraordinary. Emails between Meghan's aides and American political operatives showed careful planning. Every message, every meeting, every strategic conversation suggested intent far beyond casual networking. The files revealed a clear pattern: outreach to influential figures, discussions about potential campaigns, and the exploration of alliances capable of translating celebrity and royal prestige into political influence. Carlson's reaction, as he later described, was one of disbelief. He had expected gossip, rumors, perhaps even exaggeration. Instead, he was confronted with evidence that demanded scrutiny and analysis. The first thing that struck him was the sophistication. This wasn't a casual attempt to make friends in Washington. It was a methodical approach to positioning, influence, and long-term strategy. The communications were precise, professional, and highly strategic. Emails outlined potential partnerships, strategies for fundraising, and methods for leveraging Meghan's visibility in ways that would resonate with key political actors. There were detailed notes on audiences, messaging, and opportunities for engagement that were clearly intended to shape perception and build credibility. Carlson noticed a striking pattern in the documents. Meghan's team consistently framed initiatives as activism or charity, while simultaneously testing the waters for potential political influence. One email, in particular, stood out. It referenced a high-level meeting with a U.S. political consultant who had previously worked with prominent candidates. The consultant offered advice on messaging and positioning, insight that could be invaluable for someone considering a future political campaign. The irony was undeniable. Publicly, Meghan was a private citizen advocating for social causes. Privately, she was receiving guidance on navigating the very mechanisms of power that most Americans only observe from afar. Another element that stunned Carlson was the international dimension. The files suggested that Meghan's royal status was leveraged subtly but effectively. Invitations to exclusive events, introductions to influential figures, and access to networks that might otherwise have been unattainable were all facilitated by her title and visibility. It was a delicate balancing act: maintain the public image of independence while exploiting the privileges of royalty to expand influence. Carlson recognized immediately the audacity of the approach and the potential consequences if it were ever fully revealed. Audience engagement is key here. Ask yourself, if you were in Meghan's position, would you have acted differently? Could you resist the allure of leveraging visibility, prestige, and influence in pursuit of a strategic goal? And what does it say about ambition, ethics, and transparency when a public figure straddles the line between advocacy and political maneuvering? These are questions that Carlson, and now the audience, could not ignore. The revelations also raised profound ethical and legal questions. Members of the royal family are expected to remain apolitical. Even after stepping back, the perception of influence remains. Could Meghan, a former duchess, ethically engage with U.S. political operatives? Could she leverage her title for strategic advantage without violating norms or crossing legal boundaries? The leaked files did not provide answers. They only heightened the intrigue and tension. Carlson's astonishment stemmed not only from the content, but from the implications. This wasn't just about ambition. It was about the audacity to navigate systems of power in a way few could anticipate. Perhaps most astonishing were the subtle contradictions within Meghan's communications. While publicly advocating causes framed as humanitarian, behind the scenes, she was exploring alliances, crafting strategies, and engaging in discussions that suggested a political dimension. Carlson found emails referencing potential campaign infrastructure, introductions to policy advisors, and discussions about messaging that resonated with political constituencies. The level of detail was meticulous. It revealed someone deeply aware of the levers of influence and keenly interested in how to use them. Even more provocative were notes hinting at long-term planning. Some documents suggested exploratory discussions for a future political office, potentially as a U.S. senator, while others focused on building networks that could support broader political engagement. These were not casual observations. They were deliberate, organized, and forward-looking. For Carlson, each revelation added layers to a narrative that had previously been hidden from public view, a narrative of ambition, strategy, and calculated moves. And the timing of these communications is equally compelling. They occurred shortly after the Sussexes' exit from royal duties, at a moment when media attention was intensely focused on their personal lives, Netflix deals, and interviews. Most observers were consumed with the spectacle of royal drama. Meanwhile, Meghan was allegedly conducting strategic outreach, quietly building a web of influence in the United States. The juxtaposition is striking. Public appearances of leisure and independence contrasted with private efforts to navigate the corridors of power. Carlson also noted the skill with which these communications were framed. Emails and notes were carefully worded, emphasizing advocacy and humanitarian goals while simultaneously advancing strategic objectives. The subtlety was masterful. Anyone not looking closely might have interpreted them as innocuous correspondence. But to someone trained in investigative scrutiny, the patterns were undeniable. There was strategy, intention, and forward-thinking ambition embedded in every line. Ask yourself this: how does one maintain the duality of being a global public figure while quietly plotting influence in a complex political landscape? How much of what you saw in public appearances was authentic, and how much was carefully orchestrated to serve longer-term goals? These are the questions Carlson grappled with as he reviewed the materials, and they are questions the audience must wrestle with as well. Perhaps the most explosive revelation was a series of communications indicating that Meghan's outreach was not limited to minor operatives or casual advisors. High-level political strategists, consultants with deep experience in U.S. elections, and figures capable of shaping national discourse were involved. These were individuals with power, access, and the ability to translate visibility into tangible influence. The files suggested that Meghan's team understood the dynamics of power and was actively engaging actors who could accelerate her ambitions. It's worth pausing here. Think about the audacity. A duchess, recently departed from the monarchy, is quietly assembling the building blocks for potential political influence in a foreign country. She is leveraging her fame, her visibility, and even her royal associations to open doors. The strategy is sophisticated. The ambition is clear. And for Tucker Carlson, who has covered politics, media, and global influence for decades, the sheer scale of what he discovered was staggering. But the story takes an even more dramatic turn. One document in particular stood out: a detailed plan suggesting not only exploratory conversations, but concrete steps to engage in political advocacy and potentially position herself for office. This wasn't speculation or rumor. It was written strategy, a blueprint of sorts, mapping the next moves in what could be interpreted as a political trajectory. Carlson reportedly described the moment of discovery as surreal. He was seeing evidence that could redefine public understanding of Meghan Markle, her ambitions, and her strategic acumen. And yet, even with all this information, the files raised more questions than answers. Did Meghan intend to act on this blueprint? Was it a contingency plan, a thought experiment, or an actual roadmap? How much of it was driven by personal ambition, and how much by genuine desire to advocate for causes she believed in? The tension between public narrative and private action is what makes this revelation so compelling and so dangerous. The audience must now confront the implications. If a former duchess is capable of such strategic maneuvering, what does it mean for perceptions of power, influence, and accountability? How does this change our understanding of the line between personal ambition and public responsibility? These are not abstract questions. They are central to the unfolding drama that Carlson uncovered and that now lies before the world. And then, just when it seemed Carlson had reached the limits of astonishment, a further revelation emerged, a list of names, dates, and potential meetings that suggested the network Meghan was building was far more extensive than anyone could have imagined. These were not casual acquaintances. They were high-level operatives with the capacity to shape campaigns, public messaging, and political outcomes. The audacity, scale, and sophistication were breathtaking. What happens next? That's exactly what we will uncover in the following chapter. For the leaked files hint at even deeper layers, hidden meetings, undisclosed alliances, and a level of strategic planning that suggests Meghan Markle's ambitions in Washington were not merely exploratory. They were calculated, deliberate, and potentially game-changing. And one name on that list, one connection in particular, would shock even the most seasoned observers, hinting at ambitions that extend far beyond casual influence or advocacy. Who are the people pulling the strings behind Meghan Markle's alleged political maneuvering? Who were the operatives, strategists, and insiders quietly advising her as she navigated the delicate intersection of royalty, celebrity, and American politics? When the leaked files surfaced, they revealed an intricate web of relationships that suggested nothing in Meghan's U.S. engagement was left to chance. Each contact, each conversation, each handshake may have been part of a deliberate strategy to build influence, credibility, and leverage in the corridors of power. The first thing that stands out is the caliber of these political operatives. These weren't casual consultants or distant acquaintances. These were individuals with decades of experience in national campaigns, high-level policy advising, and strategic communications. Some had worked on presidential campaigns. Others were entrenched in think tanks, shaping policy narratives. A few were even familiar with international lobbying, bridging the gap between influence in the U.S. and global perception. The files paint a picture of meticulous planning. Meghan's team, it seems, knew precisely which individuals could accelerate her ambitions and provide insight into the mechanisms of power. One of the first names to appear repeatedly in the documents is a consultant who has advised multiple senators on campaign strategy. Emails between Meghan's aides and this operative discuss messaging, public positioning, and the nuances of American political culture. The correspondence suggests that Meghan's engagement was not superficial. She was actively seeking knowledge about political landscapes, voter perception, and the intricacies of campaign strategy. Every question, every inquiry, and every note pointed toward preparation, not casual curiosity. Another layer to consider is the sophistication with which these interactions were framed. The documents show a deliberate effort to mask political intent. Meetings were often labeled under the guise of advocacy, philanthropy, or networking. References to potential campaigns or political ambitions were carefully coded, emphasizing humanitarian and social causes. To the public, these communications could easily appear benign. Yet for those trained in political analysis, the pattern is unmistakable. Meghan was quietly mapping connections capable of turning influence into action. Ask yourself, if someone with Meghan's visibility and access decided to pursue political influence, how would they do it? What channels would they leverage? How would they ensure discretion while still cultivating the relationships necessary to succeed? The leaked files provide a blueprint, a glimpse into a world most of us never see. A world where prestige, strategy, and access intersect to shape opportunities for power. Some of the operatives were connected to fundraising networks. Others specialized in media messaging, ensuring that any future initiatives would be framed favorably. Several had direct ties to key senators and congressional aides. The files reveal proposed introductions, suggested meeting agendas, and even recommendations for events where Meghan could cultivate relationships without drawing public scrutiny. The level of organization is striking. It suggests a strategic approach similar to what one might expect from a seasoned political candidate, not someone simply exploring philanthropic initiatives. Yet contradictions appear. Publicly, Meghan continued to emphasize her independence, her privacy, and her role as a former royal seeking autonomy. Privately, however, the operatives she engaged with were providing guidance and counsel typically reserved for political aspirants. This duality, public narrative versus private action, is central to the intrigue. How does one maintain the appearance of neutrality while simultaneously preparing to navigate the machinery of American politics. And what does this tell us about the intersection of celebrity, royalty, and influence in the modern world? Some of the communications hint at long-term positioning. Certain operatives provided insight into potential districts, demographic trends, and key influencers in Washington who could be persuaded to offer support. Others focused on the optics, how to frame initiatives in ways that would resonate with both American audiences and global observers. This was a comprehensive approach, considering every element from strategy to perception, from relationships to timing. One particularly revealing document details a proposed meeting between Meghan and a high-profile policy advisor, someone with experience shaping legislation and public opinion. The file outlines objectives, potential talking points, and strategies for leveraging her public persona while subtly signaling credibility. It's a fascinating window into the level of preparation being undertaken. The advisors weren't merely giving tips. They were building a framework that could translate celebrity influence into tangible political engagement. The files also hint at coordination among multiple operatives, suggesting that Meghan's outreach was part of a larger network rather than isolated interactions. There are references to collaborative meetings, joint strategy sessions, and even contingency planning. This level of organization indicates that Meghan was not simply testing waters. She was actively assembling a support structure that could respond to opportunities and challenges in a highly strategic way. Yet the audacity of this plan is amplified by its timing. The world was focused on the Sussexes' media appearances, Netflix ventures, and public interviews. Meghan's public image was that of an empowered, independent figure, stepping away from royalty to live life on her own terms. Behind the scenes, however, she may have been engaging deeply with power brokers who could accelerate her influence in the United States. The duality is both fascinating and, for many, unsettling. Audience engagement is crucial here. Imagine being an outsider looking in. You see Meghan attending charity events, advocating for causes, and speaking on issues that matter. But beneath the surface, you learn she is receiving strategic counsel, planning meetings, and exploring avenues to expand political influence. How does that change your perception? Does it align with the narrative you've been told, or does it reveal a more calculated ambition? Another twist emerges from the files. Some operatives appear to have been connected not only to domestic U.S. politics, but also to international networks. They could provide insight into global influence, international lobbying, and cross-border strategic positioning. This is significant because it suggests that Meghan's ambitions were not confined to a single sphere. She was potentially thinking on a global scale, considering how influence in one domain could ripple across others. Yet with every revelation, contradictions multiply. Some operatives expressed caution, warning that visibility could backfire. Others encouraged outreach, emphasizing the unique advantage Meghan's royal connections provided. The files revealed debates about how to balance public perception, media coverage, and strategic goals. These internal dynamics add tension and complexity, illustrating that even within her inner circle, there was negotiation, deliberation, and strategic calculus. Perhaps most startling are indications that certain meetings were framed as exploratory for a future political campaign. While publicly Meghan positioned herself as a private citizen, these documents suggest a roadmap, tentative but deliberate, for leveraging her brand, visibility, and connections to gain influence within the U.S. political sphere. Whether these plans were fully realized or remained aspirational, the files show intention, foresight, and strategic thinking on a scale rarely associated with a recently retired royal. And then there is the human element. The operatives, strategists, and advisors themselves provide insight into the seriousness of the effort. Emails express admiration, caution, and a recognition of the potential impact of engaging someone with Meghan's profile. They discuss risk mitigation, opportunity assessment, and messaging strategies with a level of precision that underscores the stakes involved. This is not casual networking. This is the architecture of influence, carefully constructed and maintained. Ask yourself, how often do we see celebrities, even those with global recognition, navigate political landscapes with such meticulous planning? How often does royalty intersect with political ambition in such a direct and deliberate way? The answer is rarely. And that is why Carlson's discovery was so shocking. It wasn't merely the existence of these operatives. It was the sophistication of the network, the foresight of the strategy, and the audacity of someone who could straddle multiple worlds with such apparent ease. And just when it seemed the pattern was clear, another revelation emerged. A subset of operatives were connected to funders, individuals capable of providing not just strategic guidance, but financial leverage. The combination of visibility, strategy, and financial backing created a potent mix, one that could transform influence into actionable power. But even more shocking was a single email that hinted at cross-coordination between domestic and international operatives, suggesting a plan that extended far beyond casual advice. It pointed to a strategy so ambitious, so audacious, that it could reshape the perception of Meghan Markle not merely as a former duchess, but as a potential political actor on a global stage. And this leads us to the next revelation. One of the operatives on this list was an American. Their role hinted at ambitions that went beyond Washington, potentially connecting to international influence networks that could amplify impact in ways the public never imagined. What comes next will uncover the true depth of these connections, the strategies being deployed, and the people quietly orchestrating moves that, if revealed, could rewrite the narrative surrounding Meghan Markle and her ambitions. How does someone reconcile a life lived in the spotlight with ambitions hidden behind closed doors? Meghan Markle's public image has long been carefully curated. The modern duchess, humanitarian advocate, media-savvy personality, and, above all, a figure striving for independence after leaving royal duties. But the leaked files suggest a different story, one where her private actions may have contrasted sharply with the persona presented to the world. From the very beginning of her public life as a royal, Meghan faced the delicate task of balancing visibility with expectation. The media scrutinized every gesture, every outfit, every statement. Every public appearance was a calculated act, carefully choreographed to convey grace, empathy, and sophistication. The public saw a woman championing causes, advocating for gender equality, and speaking passionately about mental health. She was, in many ways, the embodiment of the modern royal, stylish, compassionate, and outspoken. Yet behind the polished exterior, the leaked files suggest another layer. Documents reveal private communications, strategic outreach, and meetings with political operatives in the United States. These communications were not casual conversations. They were structured, deliberate, and carefully framed to advance influence, build networks, and explore political opportunities. In other words, while Meghan publicly embraced a narrative of independence and neutrality, her private actions indicate a highly strategic approach to building leverage in a sphere she publicly claimed to avoid. Consider the contradictions. Publicly, Meghan insisted she was a private citizen, seeking autonomy from the monarchy, free to pursue her own path. Privately, however, the files show her coordinating with operatives, discussing potential political moves, and evaluating relationships with key decision-makers in Washington. Emails and notes suggest she explored potential avenues to translate visibility into influence, to create connections that could facilitate political engagement, and even to position herself for future campaigns. This duality, public independence versus private ambition, is at the heart of the story and central to understanding the depth of her strategy. One email, for instance, details a proposed meeting with a prominent political strategist. The public-facing purpose of the meeting is listed as a discussion of philanthropic initiatives and advocacy, but the attached notes reveal a careful consideration of messaging, influence, and potential pathways to political engagement. It's a subtle but powerful distinction. To the public, this was charity. To insiders, it was strategy. The files suggest that Meghan was acutely aware of this duality and intentionally maintained it. Audience engagement is essential here. Ask yourself, if you were building influence in a foreign political system, how would you balance visibility, credibility, and ambition? How would you ensure your actions could be interpreted in multiple ways? One for public consumption, another for private gain. Meghan's approach, according to the files, exemplifies this balancing act. She maintained a public narrative of neutrality and advocacy while quietly assembling relationships and opportunities that could position her for a different kind of power. The files also hint at a deliberate use of her royal status as a tool. Even after stepping back from official duties, Meghan retained global recognition, access to influential circles, and the prestige associated with her title. In private communications, operatives suggested ways this visibility could be leveraged strategically, without crossing overt political lines or drawing undue attention. It was a masterclass in subtle influence, maintaining the appearance of independence while exploiting advantages few Americans could access. This raises profound ethical and perceptual questions. How does the public reconcile a figure who presents herself as independent while privately exploring political pathways? Is it ambition, pragmatism, or manipulation? And how does one maintain authenticity while engaging in strategic planning that may not yet, or ever, be revealed? The tension between public perception and private intention creates a story rich with intrigue, drama, and contradiction. Another key element in this duality is timing. The Sussexes' departure from royal duties coincided with heightened media attention, interviews with high-profile journalists, and public discussions of Netflix deals, philanthropic ventures, and personal reinvention. The public was focused on appearances of leisure, autonomy, and self-empowerment. Behind the scenes, according to the files, Meghan was conducting strategy sessions, building relationships, and exploring influence with operatives capable of turning visibility into actionable political capital. The juxtaposition is striking. The world saw leisure. Insiders saw preparation. The files further suggest that Meghan was conscious of her messaging at every step. Public statements emphasized independence and humanitarian work, while private communications explored strategy, outreach, and influence. This careful management of narrative ensured that her public persona remained unassailable while simultaneously advancing private objectives. It was a delicate, high-stakes performance. One misstep could unravel credibility, expose strategy, or provoke backlash from both media and monarchy. Consider the implications for those observing from outside. The public consumed a narrative of empowerment, advocacy, and independence. Media outlets reinforced this image, portraying Meghan as a modern heroine challenging outdated royal norms. Yet, if the private communications are accurate, the real story suggests a highly calculated approach to influence and positioning, potentially extending far beyond the stated goals of charity or activism. This duality challenges the audience to question what they see, what they are told, and what remains hidden. Emotional stakes intensify when considering the human elements involved. Advisors reportedly debated how much visibility was safe, how to maintain public trust, and how to avoid perceptions of impropriety. Even within her inner circle, discussions revolved around balancing ambition with perception. These documents reveal tension, negotiation, and the careful weighing of every move, a world away from the simplicity of public appearances. The files also hint at a global perspective. Some operatives discussed international influence, cross-border relationships, and leveraging visibility in multiple spheres. Meghan's private strategy may not have been confined to the U.S. It could have extended into global networks, creating a platform that intertwines celebrity, royalty, and potential political engagement. The scope is staggering and highlights the sophistication of planning involved. Contradictions persist throughout. Publicly, Meghan advocates causes, speaks about independence, and emphasizes neutrality. Privately, she explores relationships, strategic opportunities, and influence building that suggest ambition beyond charity. This tension between public persona and private strategy is central to the drama, keeping the audience engaged, curious, and questioning. How much of what we see is authentic? How much is carefully curated to maintain the appearance of neutrality while pursuing hidden objectives? One particularly revealing set of communications shows Meghan evaluating opportunities to engage in policy discussions and network with individuals capable of shaping outcomes. Notes outline potential introductions, strategic gatherings, and messaging that balances advocacy with subtle political positioning. The files indicate a deliberate approach to maintaining dual narratives, one for public approval, one for private strategy. Audience engagement is crucial. How would you feel if a public figure you trusted were simultaneously crafting hidden strategies in pursuit of influence? Would it feel like pragmatism, manipulation, or ambition? These are the questions at the heart of Meghan Markle's duality, the tension between what she projects and what she may be quietly orchestrating behind the scenes. And yet, even with all this information, mysteries remain. Were these plans exploratory, preparatory, or actionable? Did Meghan intend to pursue formal political influence? Or were these communications contingency strategies for a future opportunity? The files suggest intent, sophistication, and foresight, but the ultimate outcome is still unknown. As the chapter closes, the key takeaway is this: Meghan Markle's public persona and private actions may not align perfectly. The polished, empathetic, independent Duchess the world sees could be one aspect of a broader, strategic ambition quietly unfolding behind closed doors. The tension between appearance and reality, perception and intention, sets the stage for the next chapter, where the leverage of her royal title and influence networks comes into sharper focus. But what she did next, how she used her royal status as a subtle tool to build influence across the Atlantic, would leave even seasoned observers questioning everything they thought they knew. What if a single title could open doors that no ordinary person could ever approach? For Meghan Markle, her royal status was more than ceremonial. It was currency, a key that unlocked opportunities, access, and influence in ways few outsiders could imagine. The leaked files suggest that even after stepping back from official duties, Meghan's team recognized the immense strategic value embedded in her title. It was a tool, a subtle lever, and potentially a bridge into the highest circles of American influence. The world saw Meghan as a duchess who had stepped back from royal life, seeking autonomy, privacy, and freedom. She was framed as independent, a private citizen navigating life on her own terms. But behind closed doors, her team appears to have leveraged the prestige and visibility of her title to create connections with political operatives, high-profile advisors, and influential stakeholders. Invitations to elite events, introductions facilitated by mutual acquaintances, and access to people in positions of power. These were not coincidences. They were the fruits of strategic positioning that utilized her royal affiliation as a subtle, yet potent advantage. Emails in the files reveal that operatives frequently discussed the optics of her title. They noted how a royal association could command attention, lend credibility, and smooth doors into networks that might otherwise remain closed. One operative wrote about the immediate gravitas Meghan's title provided when meeting U.S. political strategists, noting that it elevated her above the level of a typical celebrity. It wasn't just about glamour. It was about perception, trust, and influence. Audience engagement is critical here. Imagine being in a room with people who could shape policy, media narratives, and campaigns. How would your interactions change if you entered not as an outsider, but as someone with global recognition and prestige? Meghan's royal title gave her that advantage, a subtle signal that she commanded respect and attention even before a word was spoken. It is a form of leverage few Americans could replicate, and it was strategically deployed. But it wasn't only about the initial impression. The files suggest that her team actively calculated how the royal affiliation could be woven into long-term strategies. In communications with operatives, they discussed how to frame conversations, introductions, and meetings to maximize the implicit authority her title conferred. The goal was to ensure that every interaction carried weight, credibility, and influence without appearing overtly political. This delicate balance, using the advantages of royalty while maintaining the appearance of independence, was central to her strategy. The irony is striking. Publicly, Meghan championed causes and advocated for humanitarian issues. Privately, the royal title that symbolized centuries of tradition became a strategic tool to amplify influence in political, social, and media circles in the United States. This duality, humanitarian advocate versus subtle power player, is part of what makes the story so captivating. It forces the audience to question how visibility and status can be transformed into strategic advantage. Some files even reveal internal discussions about how to navigate potential scrutiny. Operatives debated how to highlight her independence while still benefiting from the prestige of her title. The communications suggest an acute awareness of the fine line between perception and reality. They wanted the advantages of recognition without triggering accusations of political overreach or impropriety. This level of strategic thinking is rare, and it underscores the sophistication of the efforts underway. Consider this: Meghan could attend elite events, engage with influencers, and participate in high-profile initiatives under the banner of independence. Yet her royal title remained a silent signal, a mark of distinction that commanded attention, opened doors, and lent authority. It was leverage without overt leverage. To the untrained eye, it may have appeared incidental. To insiders, it was a calculated asset. Emails suggest that operatives actively advised on how to introduce Meghan in different contexts, emphasizing her global perspective, diplomatic connections, and unique experience as a former duchess. They noted that the title could create opportunities for meetings with policymakers, media figures, and donors that might otherwise require years of effort to cultivate. The files describe subtle ways to exploit visibility while framing interactions as advocacy-driven rather than politically motivated. Ask yourself, if you had access to a platform that commanded global attention, how would you use it? Meghan's team appears to have answered that question with precision. They recognized that her royal affiliation was a resource, one that could open doors, lend credibility, and facilitate strategic relationships without the need for overt political statements. It was influence disguised as opportunity, ambition wrapped in diplomacy. The files also hint at international leverage. Royal recognition carries weight far beyond national borders. European, Middle Eastern, and even American operatives acknowledged the subtle authority conferred by Meghan's status. Meetings were scheduled, invitations extended, and introductions facilitated, all influenced by the implicit credibility of a royal title. In effect, her past role as a duchess created networks that could be activated at strategic moments to support private objectives. Contradictions continue to emerge. Publicly, Meghan emphasized her autonomy and neutrality. Privately, she leveraged centuries-old symbolism and prestige to gain access, shape conversations, and influence decision-making. This delicate balance, being seen as independent while subtly using influence, demonstrates a level of strategic thinking that goes far beyond ordinary celebrity engagement. It's the interplay of perception, status, and action that defines this chapter of the story. The files even suggest that operatives evaluated how different contexts amplified the effect of her title. Introductions at policy-focused events, philanthropic gatherings, and elite media functions were all calibrated to maximize impact. The royal affiliation was positioned as a silent amplifier, a signal of credibility and authority that complemented her personal achievements and public advocacy. It was subtle, yet powerful. And yet, the most surprising element is how seamlessly Meghan appeared to navigate these dual roles. Outwardly, she was the private citizen, championing causes, appearing independent. In practice, the royal title remained an asset, a key to unlock relationships and opportunities that might otherwise remain inaccessible. The files suggest that every interaction, every introduction, and every meeting was considered through this lens. How can her status be used strategically without undermining the narrative of independence? For the audience, the implications are profound. A title, a legacy, and a public persona can serve as tools of influence, even when the world perceives autonomy. Meghan's approach, as revealed in the leaked documents, demonstrates the power of perception, strategy, and symbolic authority. It's a lesson in the subtle art of leverage, an art few outsiders could execute with such precision. But what makes this even more fascinating is the intersection with U.S. political operatives. The files indicate that Meghan's team was not just relying on prestige. They were actively combining it with strategy, networks, and insider guidance. Royal leverage met political expertise. Symbolic authority met practical influence. And in the right hands, the combination could be extraordinarily powerful. And just when it seemed the story couldn't become more complex, the next revelation emerged. One of the operatives suggested a potential bridge to U.S. policymakers that would amplify Meghan's influence even further. It wasn't just access. It was access with strategic consequence, an opportunity to translate prestige into actionable influence. What happened next? The steps Meghan and her operatives took to transform royal status into real-world leverage would shock even the most experienced observers and set the stage for the next chapter. The Senate ambitions surface. Could a former duchess, recently stepped back from royal life, envision herself in the halls of American political power? According to the leaked files, the answer may be yes. The notion of Meghan Markle pursuing political influence in the United States isn't just speculative. It is suggested in communications, strategy notes, and private discussions that outline possible steps toward public office, including, astonishingly, a Senate run. The audacity of such a plan is breathtaking. To transition from royalty to potential elected official in a foreign country requires both strategic foresight and extraordinary ambition. The files reveal discussions with operatives who had deep experience in U.S. campaigns. They explored messaging, fundraising, and voter outreach, components that are essential for any political trajectory. One email details a hypothetical scenario, laying out districts, demographics, and political landscapes that could be favorable to someone with Meghan's profile. The analysis is meticulous, weighing factors such as name recognition, media influence, and networks of support. This is not casual speculation. This is strategy. Ask yourself, how often does a public figure, especially one recently stepping back from a foreign monarchy, receive advice on political positioning in another country? Rarely, if ever. Yet here was Meghan, allegedly exploring pathways that leveraged her visibility, royal connections, and international recognition to navigate the highly complex arena of American politics. Emails suggest she was advised on the optics of her public persona, ensuring that her advocacy work and media appearances reinforced credibility without appearing opportunistic. Some operatives focused on the messaging strategy. They discussed how to frame her activities to resonate with key constituencies while downplaying the influence of her royal past. For instance, events framed as charitable or activist-driven could serve dual purposes, supporting causes while building familiarity and trust among potential supporters and influencers in the U.S. political landscape. The careful orchestration reveals a sophisticated approach to positioning and influence. The files also hint at networking strategy. Meghan's team appears to have identified a series of political connectors, individuals capable of introducing her to power brokers, potential donors, and policy advisors. These relationships were not casual. They were deliberate, cultivated to open doors that, without her visibility and status, would likely remain closed. Emails reference potential meetings with high-profile political figures, including senators, strategists, and policy advisors with the capacity to advise, endorse, or facilitate opportunities. But perhaps the most remarkable element is timing. These discussions began shortly after Meghan and Harry's departure from royal duties, at a moment when public attention was fixed on their media projects, Netflix interviews, and public appearances. The juxtaposition is striking. The world perceived leisure, independence, and personal reinvention, while behind the scenes, strategic conversations were underway to explore formal political engagement. The duality reinforces the complexity of Meghan's actions, blending public image with private ambition. Audience engagement is essential here. How would you feel if you learned that a public figure, whose narrative you've followed and empathized with, might be quietly exploring political office in a country not their own? Does it change your perception of authenticity, independence, and trust? These are precisely the questions Carlson and now the audience must grapple with as the evidence unfolds. The files also suggest that Meghan's team evaluated potential campaign infrastructure. Discussions included advisors with experience in fundraising, voter outreach, and messaging campaigns. Notes indicate careful consideration of campaign strategy, including polling, messaging alignment, and public perception management. It was an approach that mirrored the efforts of seasoned candidates, highlighting the seriousness with which these discussions were conducted. Contradictions abound. Publicly, Meghan emphasized independence and neutrality, positioning herself as a private citizen. Privately, however, the files show an approach that is strategic, deliberate, and aligned with the mechanics of electoral politics. Emails between operatives reveal careful debate about how to maintain credibility while pursuing opportunities that could have lasting political impact. Balancing public perception with private action required extraordinary planning and foresight. One particularly revealing document outlines the potential sequencing of meetings with U.S. political figures, including suggested introductions and messaging strategies. The plan appears to balance advocacy and strategy, carefully leveraging visibility and connections while maintaining the appearance of neutrality. It demonstrates not only foresight but an understanding of the delicate intersection between public persona and private ambition. Financial strategy also played a role. Leaked files suggest that advisors discussed potential fundraising opportunities, donor engagement, and strategic partnerships to support long-term influence. While these discussions were framed as exploratory, they reflect a sophisticated approach to building the resources necessary for any serious political engagement. The combination of visibility, credibility, and financial backing created a potent foundation for influence. It is also worth noting the subtlety with which the royal connection was utilized. Advisors frequently referenced the need to leverage prestige without appearing overtly political. The files suggest careful planning in how to position Meghan's background, reputation, and public recognition to gain credibility while avoiding accusations of exploiting royal status. This strategic framing demonstrates an awareness of both opportunity and risk. Ask yourself, if you had the visibility of a duchess and the access to networks in Washington, how would you navigate ambition without exposing yourself to criticism or scandal? Meghan's team appears to have answered this question with precision, balancing the advantages of her title with strategic discretion and careful messaging. But the revelations don't end with planning. One document references a potential liaison with a high-profile senator's office. A connection that, if activated, could provide both advice and credibility in navigating American politics. The file includes proposed talking points, potential event participation, and strategies to cultivate relationships. It's a glimpse into what could have been a carefully constructed roadmap toward political influence. The files also reveal contingency planning. Advisors considered multiple scenarios, exploration of political opportunities, continued focus on advocacy, or leveraging visibility to support influence indirectly. These discussions suggest that Meghan's ambitions were multifaceted, accounting for risks, opportunities, and public perception at every step. Audience reflection is critical. This is not merely a story of aspiration. It is a story of strategic foresight, dual narratives, and deliberate positioning. Meghan's actions, as suggested by the leaked files, reflect an extraordinary blend of opportunity, ambition, and careful planning that few could imagine. It raises questions about the intersection of celebrity, royalty, and political influence, and about how public figures navigate visibility to advance strategic goals. And just when it seemed the scope of her ambitions was impressive enough, another revelation emerged. One of the operatives suggested not just advisory engagement, but active participation in a campaign strategy, a possibility that, if pursued, would transform Meghan from observer to participant in American politics. This insight sets the stage for the next chapter, where secret meetings, hidden correspondences, and the mechanics of influence will be revealed in full. What Meghan did next, the clandestine steps that pushed her ambitions closer to realization, would leave the political world stunned and raise questions no one anticipated. What secrets lie in the emails, messages, and private communications of someone whose public persona is carefully controlled? For Meghan Markle, the leaked files suggest that much of her strategic planning occurred behind the scenes, in correspondences that were invisible to the public eye. These communications, meticulously documented, reveal a web of meetings, outreach, and networking designed to advance influence, maintain discretion, and explore political opportunities, all while the world watched her carefully curated public narrative. The first revelation is the sheer volume and sophistication of these hidden correspondences. Emails between Meghan's team and political operatives are methodical, deliberate, and precise. They detail introductions, strategic advice, and suggested meeting agendas. Notes outline potential talking points, ways to frame her public image, and how to engage with key decision-makers without drawing scrutiny. The effort suggests someone deeply aware of the stakes and determined to navigate them with maximum advantage. Imagine the clandestine rhythm of these communications. Day after day, emails and messages would arrive. Suggestions for events, recommendations for introductions, insights into U.S. political culture. Each message, each note, was a small step in building a larger network. The files indicate careful documentation, follow-ups, and coordination among advisors, evidence of an organized, strategic effort rather than casual outreach. Audience engagement is key here. Picture yourself receiving guidance from insiders capable of opening doors to powerful figures, while maintaining complete discretion. How would you navigate such a network? How would you ensure that every move aligns with your public persona while advancing private objectives? These are precisely the tensions revealed in Meghan's hidden correspondences. Some documents highlight meetings framed as informal discussions, but strategically designed to cultivate influence. Dinner invitations, private lunches, and exclusive gatherings were not random. They were opportunities to meet operatives, advisors, and potential allies. Emails often included suggested topics, messaging frameworks, and post-meeting follow-ups. It was a meticulous choreography, balancing visibility with discretion, ambition with public perception. The files also reveal the interplay between American operatives and Meghan's advisors. Discussions included guidance on communication, timing, and how to navigate introductions to high-level political figures. One particularly detailed correspondence outlined steps for approaching influential policy advisors, including framing her questions, demonstrating credibility, and subtly leveraging her global recognition. The documents suggest these meetings were carefully orchestrated to maximize impact without drawing public attention. Ask yourself, if someone had the visibility, connections, and credibility of Meghan Markle, how would you structure outreach to ensure access and influence? These files provide a blueprint. They demonstrate strategic thinking, an understanding of leverage, and the meticulous planning required to operate in a high-stakes environment. Even more revealing are the contradictions inherent in these correspondences. Publicly, Meghan maintained a narrative of independence, neutrality, and advocacy. Privately, she was actively exploring pathways to influence, receiving guidance from experienced operatives, and considering long-term strategic options. This duality, the public persona versus private action, is central to the intrigue. How does one maintain credibility while orchestrating plans that remain invisible to the world? Meghan's hidden communications suggest she was acutely aware of this balance. Some messages hint at exploratory conversations with individuals capable of providing access to influential networks, fundraising opportunities, and policy guidance. Others reference proposed introductions to media figures and political strategists who could amplify messaging and visibility. Each note reflects careful consideration of timing, optics, and potential outcomes. The goal appears to have been to create a network that could be activated strategically without exposing the plans prematurely. Contradictions multiply when reviewing the tone of certain communications. Some advisors express caution, warning that increased visibility could trigger scrutiny or criticism. Others encourage strategic engagement, emphasizing that visibility and credibility could be leveraged effectively. These debates suggest that Meghan's team was not only aware of opportunity, but also of the risks inherent in balancing public perception with private ambition. The files reveal instances of direct guidance on how to approach meetings with influential figures. Advisors suggested emphasizing her advocacy, highlighting global recognition, and demonstrating credibility, all while maintaining the appearance of independence. It was a subtle dance, requiring careful attention to language, tone, and framing. The sophistication of these instructions suggests a level of strategic insight rarely associated with someone recently departed from monarchy. Audience reflection is critical. Imagine the tension of navigating such a dual path, advancing influence and building networks while preserving a public persona designed to appear neutral and independent. Every word, every interaction, every meeting carried weight, potential risk, and strategic significance. These hidden correspondences suggest Meghan was operating at a level of awareness and calculation that few could match. The files also point to the international dimension of her strategy. Some correspondences reference global contacts, advisors with cross-border experience, and strategies to build influence that extends beyond U.S. political networks. This was not a localized effort. It was an integrated approach, leveraging prestige, visibility, and relationships across multiple spheres to maximize potential impact. One particularly striking example is a message outlining a proposed dinner with a political consultant, followed by notes on discussion topics, potential allies, and follow-up strategies. The planning was meticulous, including contingencies and alternative approaches depending on how the conversation unfolded. It demonstrates not only strategic thinking, but also an acute awareness of the consequences of each interaction. And then there are the subtle clues about potential political aspirations. Some messages hint at exploratory discussions about campaigns, strategic positioning, and ways to translate visibility into actionable influence. The language is carefully coded, emphasizing advocacy while hinting at ambitions that, if realized, could position Meghan as a player in American political circles. Financial considerations were also part of the discussions. Emails reference potential donors, funding strategies, and methods for leveraging visibility to cultivate support without violating norms or attracting undue attention. It was a comprehensive approach, blending influence, strategy, and resources to build a network capable of supporting long-term objectives. Audience engagement